Lebanon, like Palestine, did not exist. It's not Jumlat and Ja'ja deciding that we ended Harb al-Jabal or you get attacked. What happened the Arabs doing? Nothing. No, Hamas is not going to destroy Israel.
The majority of Lebanese Christians felt one way, the majority of Lebanese Muslims felt differently.
We might cross a line that we can't come back from. I don't think we moved past the civil war. We were closer to an Arab state in 1970s than we are today. I think the answers are out there. The solutions exist. I've said this 100 times, and here's one more time. We need to sit together. We need to talk together.
Ramzi Abu Ismail, welcome to MTV.
Thank you, Roni.
I've had the privilege of speaking to you several times on my podcast. I know you outside of the podcasting world as well. So I think of you as a friend before being a guest on a podcast. But you're a unique person because whenever there's the convergence of politics and psychology, I turn to you. And thankfully, you have an Instagram page that delivers a lot of your content. It's The Political Psychologist. I recommend anyone to check it out because, in a way, you have your own podcast on Instagram, but it's on your terms. It's content, it's video, it's analysis, and most importantly, it's research, which I don't think enough people do when it comes to understanding this part of the world. So I want to begin, with your permission, before we get into Lebanese specific terrain, let's try to put what's happening next door to us in context. This episode will come out on Tuesday, October 17. Now, this gives us leeway to talk about the Arab-Israeli war, but also October 17 in hindsight. So let's start with Palestine. That terrible tragedy that we're watching from here endlessly. And I think both of us are in a position where we're turned to offer insight, but it's often premature. And we're turned to maybe to give quick answers and sound bites to tragedy, which I think is unfair. So in your work, and trying to put Lebanon in context with Palestine, how do you see yourself addressing this issue to an audience that maybe wants to see both the political angle, also the psychological angle, and really where violence can tear societies apart, and it has torn Lebanon apart, this struggle and Lebanon in perspective?
Thanks, Tony, for the introduction. Always a pleasure being with you. You are a friend, and I enjoy our conversations on and off air. I think, like you said, that people do turn to analysts to know what's going on, especially when they're fearing a war. But they also want someone to confirm their biases and their positions and where they stand. And I think this is the thing that I've been facing over the past few days, is that people want you to say what they want to hear. And when you don't, you either lose your credibility or you get attacked. The situation is very complex, and I think giving a proper analytical opinion or an analysis of what's going on is premature. It's at the moment, is my opinion is as good as any in that sense. But I do see that there are different narratives shaping around the conflict, especially when it comes to how Lebanon relates to the conflict. So there are people who are unbothered with whether or not, when I say unbothered, I don't mean they don't care. I just mean it's not on the top of their minds now. What they want is they want to show support to the Palestinian cause because they feel emotionally charged. There are strong emotions about this cause. It was part of their upbringing. It was part of the narrative they know. And they just feel sad. They feel bad. And of course, part of those are the people who are humanitarians in a sense that they would want to stand with fairness or justice wherever it was. But this is closer to home, so therefore emotions are stronger. On the other hand, there's the other narrative of people that want to show support to the cause, but are skeptical about Lebanon being dragged into this war or being involved in any way in this war. And you see that those people are showing support, but also, taking a step back on, yes, but this doesn't mean. So yes, I understand that there's a right. I understand that there's an injustice happening, but also I don't want to be involved. I don't want to be dragged into this. And of course, there's a third narrative, which is people simply don't care.
Yeah.
They look at the Palestinian cause as something that is not only alien, but also at times something they stand against, because it reminds them of the Lebanese war. It reminds them of times where the Palestinians committed maybe crimes of war against Lebanese, specifically against Christian Lebanese. And those people that usually are, all in for supporting the cause, look at others from somehow a higher moral ground, where they assume that they have a higher moral ground, and they tell people that you're supporting evil, or you're not supporting what is good. And this is not about Lebanon; it's about supporting the cause. And those people seem to miss that that's exactly what happened some 50 or 60 years ago. And those people who are afraid of this scenario happening again have concerns. They have fears. And I'm sitting right in the middle, and I'm just trying to say that there are different narratives that I see, I understand. Even if I, take this a bit more regionally or internationally, there are different narratives on this. Do you support Palestine? Do you support Israel? And I think, as a pragmatist, as someone who would like to move forward in this region, I support a solution to the problem. And I don't think that ongoing violence on either side would support a resolution. Yes, I understand that even Gaza has been under siege. I get that for 16 years, and they have been treated unfairly. And the Palestinians have been absent from the political and the diplomatic playground. We haven't seen them doing anything over the past 20 years or so, ever since Abu Mazen came in. So when someone says that, yeah, but this has been ongoing in Gaza, my response in politics is, what have been the Palestinians doing? What have been the Arabs doing? Nothing. So yes, I understand that this is a reaction now that's happening, but I don't see that this is pushing towards a resolution. Israel is certainly stronger. No, Hamas is not going to destroy Israel because they managed to do the attack in a day or two. And therefore, I fear of where this might take us. I fear that we're crossing a line, which is similar to the lines of the Lebanese conflict that I keep on discussing or talking about. I fear that we might cross a line that we can't come back from.
That's a very sharp and also cautious reflection over two things: what's happening right now, and trying to look at Lebanon in perspective, which is not an easy thing to do. But the reason I wanted to start it with this subject is because when I think of your work, and this is me being subjective, I think of you as a problem solver. Even though your research is more academic, but I think there's a practical angle to that. And it's primarily surrounding violence, collective violence. Also, identity comes up quite frequently. And I think identity and this cause and its ability to trigger anxiety, violence, and everything you mentioned, it happens all the time. And now it's almost like everyone is falling back to their default positions. So let's try to bring the Palestinian cause and Lebanese identity together. Is it a simple thing of just communities seeing this cause differently through different lenses? Have things moved on? When I think about the 1970s, and I wasn't around to know how Lebanon ended up in civil war with my own two eyes, but everything I've read, everything I've heard, it's, I think, safe to suggest the majority of Lebanese Christians felt one way, the majority of Lebanese Muslims felt differently. I don't know if that's the case right now. It almost feels like things have moved on to a degree, but there's still fault lines in the story anyway. So can we unpack that a bit?
This takes me back because this conversation has been ongoing for the past few years, right? Is it a new Lebanon? Is it not a new Lebanon? And my position has been steady over the past years. I don't think we moved past the civil war. The fact that we saw some changes amongst some groups, the fact that we saw repositioning amongst other groups, the fact that we have more moderate voices, we have different media channels, we have different approaches to the problem. However, when we look at the foundation of the problem, I think the problem exists. The problem is still there. And this war that is happening today is actually a very good example of the problem still existing as it was some 50 or 60 years ago. To understand the depth of the problem, we have to acknowledge that this whole region has been constructed 100 years ago in its current form. The nations we hold on to today and we fight for today did not exist a few hundred years ago. Now, I understand that some people would like to give their identity some depth into history and claim that, we have been living here. Yes, we as ethnicities, as religions, as groups of people, as families, but we as nations have not. Lebanon, like Palestine, did not exist before 1916. And this is a foundational issue, which is why this region is very, interlocked and interconnected, is that anything that happens anywhere within this region affects the other places, because when the map when the map came to exist and the Ottoman Empire lost the war, and then the British and the French decided to split the region into based on their interests, there were many social aspects that were not taken into consideration. So I just want to bridge the gap between why Christians specifically fear this Palestinian cause, even beyond the civil war. Just let's take it a bit. You said people went to their default setting, and I agree. But why is that? So we know that the Arab Revolution against the Ottoman Empire, which was supported by the Brits, started from somewhere near Jordan around the end of the First World War. And this has led to then, for instance, Palestine and Jordan taking flags that were the flags of, or flags from the colors that resemble the Arab Revolution.
Yeah.
And every color is a representation of an Islamic era. The green, the white, and the black, they all represent the Abbasis, the Umayyads, and the Fatimids eras. And this has a very Islamic connotation to the existence or to the creation of these countries. This in itself is a threat to any minority that lives in this region, especially that, I don't know if you know, but if we go back to the 1800s or 1700s, the Ottoman Empire ruled the Levant from 1517 till the 20th century. And during that time, Muslims had privileges, non-Muslims didn't. It was not until the reforms of 1830-something that non-Muslims started, having equal rights or equal privileges. And people think it doesn't matter. It does. It's part of the collective memory of certain groups. It's part of the collective conscious of certain groups, where groups feel like we have always been the second citizen, the second class citizen. We're never as good as Muslims. And this gets fortified when we see, for instance, that the Palestinian resistance has an Islamic, I don't know if I could say goal, or just, they're speaking with the broader Islamic world, It's about the Aqsa Mosque. So all of this, plays a role in how people look at the conflict. So when I know for a fact that these countries did not exist, they came to exist in the 20th century. There's an Islamic connotation to the countries that came to exist. And then you have some minorities in Lebanon who were not, I don't know, I'm not going to say they were treated badly, but I'm saying they were second-class citizens in the Ottoman Empire. And then comes a time where they were given power in Mount Lebanon in the late 1800s, right? And then they were given more power when the Greater Lebanon was established in 1920. So therefore, when they look at this and they remember all the collective memory and consciousness of previous eras, it's very normal and natural that they feel threatened by anything that wants to unite this land again. So I think this is important when we're looking at why do these different identities perceive the conflict differently. And then we add to that the Civil War. And then we add to that what happened during the Civil War. And we end up today in 2023 with groups that have no emotions of threat whatsoever from the Palestinians, and therefore they're willing to embrace the cause and support it. You have groups that are skeptical, and those groups who are skeptical can be of any religion or faith, and same for those who are supporting it. But you said the majority. I like this word. The majority of Muslims support the Palestinian cause. That was the case. That still is the case.
Okay.
Now you have a small minority that stands in the middle between, I support the case because of its humanitarian aspect and because I want justice in this region and because I understand that we cannot move forward into the future if this region did not, reach some sort of peace agreement where we can coexist.
Yeah.
And those people are of different faiths, different sects, different backgrounds. But then those who hate the Palestinians or hate the cause are clearly still, a majority of those people are Christians who still hold this perception of threat, of fear, of I don't want this to happen again.
What I find interesting today, and I'm going to lean on what you just said, which is a very deep journey into the Tanzimat era, and it's a good reminder of all these things you forget over time. That even the way you describe the colors of the flags, I take it for granted now. Those are the colors, but you're right. There's history there, and then on the other side, minoritarian fear. And then Arab nationalism, or if you will, Islamic nationalism, that's maybe lazily phrased, versus Lebanese nationalism, the way Christians perceive it, they're bound to clash. So I appreciate that longevity. But today, in 2023, is it fair to assume at least that there are perhaps a majority of Lebanese Muslims that fall into the category you mentioned earlier, that they support the struggle, but not in Lebanon? And the reason I'm going down that road, I don't know if you feel the same way in Lebanon. You're always looking at your phone to see what's happening in the south, more than what's happening in Gaza. That is more Hezbollah related than Hamas, meaning waiting to see if Hezbollah does more than it's done already, or if Israel bombs more than it has, which means to me, a lot of us at least see the struggle less at home today than 1970. Is that part of the journey, that less reluctant to have the struggle here? And I'm talking across now.
Yeah, I hear you. And if I was to be very scientific, I would say I don't know. We don't have data today to say whether or not the majority of Muslims feel like they're supporting the cause, but they want it to stay away. I don't know. I would say the evidence you gave is anecdotal in a sense that, yes, I'm concerned whether or not Israel is going to hit Lebanon, because this brings the perception of threat from Israel closer to home, and it becomes a real threat.
Right.
But this doesn't mean that I don't necessarily support the cause and feel emotionally willing to engage, willing to chant, willing to go on a protest, willing to participate in social media or online solidarity movement. So I'm not sure I necessarily read the evidence you suggested as one where we are further away than what we were in 1970s. Of course, we were closer to an Arab state in 1970s than we are today.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because
Yeah.
in terms of time frame,
Yeah,
you know, people who lived in the 1970s, or some of them, would still remember that Lebanon became a state not so long ago, and there was a Thawra Arabiya Kubra in the 1900s, and you know it was still present in the memory. And then came Abdel Nasser, and he fueled this Arabism or the Arab national narrative. Of course, the good and the bad thing maybe is that he tried to take this away from religion, suggest that we're all Arabs and we can have this identification, except that the minorities did not take that on board, or some of the minorities did not take that on board. We know that the Druze took that on board very well at some point for different.
The Copts didn't over time, and so it's interesting that even at home it plays out differently in Egypt than here. Yeah.
So there has been some changes to the narrative, and yes, today maybe people do not think that we want to be one big Arab nation, but we still hear the narrative of, you know, we're Arabs.
Yeah.
Are we Arabs? What is Arabism? There are still big questions that have not been that are not answered by anyone, and that are completely ignored. So when someone says, there's even still the analysis of Christian Lebanese wanting Lebanism as a national identification, they are still looked at as extreme right-wingers. You're extreme right-wingers.
Yeah.
Because we're Arabs. And Arabs seem to not understand that Arabism came from Islam, and minorities have a problem with accepting that. Because of many factors that happened, and many factors that contributed to how minorities feel.
I'm trying to remember now. The Arab, I mean, this is now going a bit further back in time. The philosophy of Arab nationalism, you correct me if I'm wrong, I remember it being a Christian-led movement to pacify Islamic tendencies going back to the 1930s or even earlier. The names now escape me, but is it Michel Aflaq?
It's going to bring in the Ba'ath Party.
I mean, that kind of, which is a very toxic journey in its own, right? But that kind of hesitancy to see Muslim resurgency in politics, is that...
No doubt that there has been some movements that try to absorb Arabism or shift Arabism from a religious identity into a social identity where we share the language, we share a certain culture. So you have the Ba'ath, right? We spoke about one big Arab nation, and then you have Anton Saadi, who spoke about a smaller nation within the Arab world, the Greater Syria.
Both Christian names.
Yes, and both narratives, to me, it was their own attempt at trying to absorb the majority that existed. I mean, someone might say that it was that time where we were closer to developing some sort of a national feeling that goes beyond religion or sectarianism, while today, I mean, if someone like Anton Saadi comes today and tries to suggest something, I don't think he'd get 100 followers around him, which shows that
you would. They're all in Hamra.
Something else, I mean, not him.
Right.
Something else.
Not those 100.
Not those 100, So what I'm saying is, I don't feel there's enough evidence that suggests that we are moving forward. I mean, we certainly are. We are moving forward because time is moving on and things are settling down. But we have not had the conversation on identity, on the national identity yet. And we had few civil wars, few before the establishment of Lebanon, and one or one and a half after the 1.75 after the establishment of Lebanon. We've had different opinions, different narratives on who we are and where we come from and what we want. So the identity is not established. Now, we know even if we were a homogeneous group, we would require, 100 or 150 or 200 years for this identity to settle down, for us to know who we are as a nation. ما بالك, we're not homogeneous groups. We're conflicting groups. We fought over resources for a few hundred years. And we have the biggest collection of minorities living in one small place
It's true.
with no clear majority. So even if we had maybe one majority, the minorities might work together to do a balance. But with all the groups being minorities, or most of the groups being minorities, including the Sunnis, because the Sunnis in Lebanon feel like they're not part of that Sunni world.
Yeah.
They have a different Sunni war to fight in Lebanon, where they're trying to show that we're also part of this
Yeah.
struggle. So I hear you. I believe we have made some advancements, but I don't think we have really escaped the past yet.
Both of us have seen the most recent attempt, let's say, at reshaping Lebanese identity, at least through politics. We both know October 17 in and out. I believe both of us were here, or at least were around when the protests were happening. And we both, in a way, I think, got closer to the story as a result. I want anyone who's watching or listening to check out our episodes on my podcast. The most recent one was a few months ago, where we dove deep into identity. So I'm not going to try to repeat what we said earlier, but I'll try to take it and move from October 17's 4-year anniversary into your research. The goal that you set out earlier, which is a national identity, and that climate of political violence that hovers in Lebanon and now for over a century, really, in the region. How do you see advancements in forging a national identity given those immense constraints? And this is something that now we take for granted. Every few years, there's a Hamas-Israeli war, or there's a Palestinian-Israeli war. Maybe every 15, 20 years, there's a Hezbollah-Israeli war. Our generation at home, we're always thinking about civil war anyway. That kind of climate and national identity, how can you, not you, how can we go down that road together and reach that solution with that constant emotional anxiety, bringing us, and I agree, largely back to a default that is really, really old. It's not. It's the 1970s and earlier.
I think the answers are out there. The solutions exist, and I think we have enough experts to put in plans to work out what to do.
They've all been on my podcast.
But yes, but the question is, do we want to do that? Because it's like in relationships, right? We know that for a relationship to succeed, you need to communicate, and communicate some more. Not, if is that you make a stance, okay, and then you decide that I'm claiming the kitchen. And let's just try to narrow this down into a familial struggle so that we understand what's going on. Different people live in the same house. They don't see eye to eye. One of them thinks actually, every one of them thinks they have more ownership of the house than the other. And they got to a point where they fought. As a result of that, instead of talking about why they fought and trying to come to a conclusion or a solution or a way out of this, they each claimed a territory in the house and made it theirs. And then they wouldn't leave this territory. And if they would, they always want to keep an eye on it because they fear that you might come into it and take it. And then from within this territory, they negotiate. So I'm in the kitchen, you're in the bathroom. I want to use the bathroom. You want to have something from the kitchen. So you send me a messenger. How do we fix this? This is what has been going in this. So the solution, get those people into a different room and have a conversation on and on and on until all of these struggles, these threats, these perceptions, these claims are put on the table. Something we never did. I mean, I've said this 100 times, and here's one more time. We need to sit together. We need to talk together. And we fear that. We fear that if we talk, we would fight. But that's okay. If we need to fight to get it out, then let's get it out. But we need to get it out. مش معقول every time, on every occasion, someone goes like, we're glad we killed Bashir, and those say, this is Bashir is our president, and then we fight over Bashir. This is one example. Gaza or Hamas and Israel, and then we fight over the Palestinian cause. Something happens somewhere and we fight over that again. We're having the same conflicts over and over. They're just taking different shapes. But it's really rooted in the same problem. I just want to go back to the beginning of 17th of October, because
Sure.
this is, I think it's important. It's important to understand that we have the means to know what's going on. We've done research in Lebanon when 17th October started in 2020. I know for a fact that nothing changed. And I said that back then. We still have sectarian groups, even those who are participating in the supposed revolution, don't have different emotions. Yes, they all think they're Lebanese. I mean, you ask someone from Hezbollah, they tell you, I'm Lebanese. You ask someone from Kisirwan, they tell you, I'm Lebanese. The problem is not with them acknowledging they're Lebanese. The problem is, what is Lebanon to them? How do they see this identity?
That other room you described, which is nice, the analogy of they're in the wrong room, arguing over the same arguments. What is the other room in our case? If all these people are to yell it out or fight it out, how can you imagine them doing that in a way that's meaningful to forging a solid national identity?
First of all groups should put their narratives on the table. If a group thinks that they have been mistreated for the past 200 years, they should put this on the table. If a group acknowledges their privileges over the past 200 years, they need to put this on the table. So narratives should be put on a table. And then we need to ask ourselves a question. So we need to now build a new narrative, because we need to have a history book about the story of this country. The history book cannot end إنه أخذنا استقلال ب 43. So what is the history book we want to write? Do we want to say that we are different groups who have different narratives, who came together in a certain year and then decided to start a shared journey? Or do we want to say that Lebanon started in 1920, so let out all your grievances on the table, but it's not going in the book?
Right.
You get my point?
So is this like not a referendum, sorry, is this like a national meeting of
I
sorts?
think so. I think we need to have meetings in every town hall in this country. We need to have a national dialogue. We need to bring everyone in. We need to hear everyone out. People still feel, they still grieve on their loved ones, the people they lost in the war. People still go to places that they've been to in the war and they feel scared at night. We still have this. This is still part of our national narrative, national conflict. So yes, by all means, it's not enough for two leaders, because I mean I've heard this on and on, that okay, Jumblat and the Batrak, well, they shook hands in the Jabal and everyone attended. Yeah, but this is not how reconciliation happens. It's not two leaders shaking hands. It's not Jumblat and Ja'ja deciding that we ended Harb al-Jabal, because there are tens of thousands of dead people and families who still feel scared and grievances that did not heal. And even if today, for instance, the Druze would look at Marinates or the opposite and they feel like you're not the enemy today. Yes, the enemy might have changed, but the story is still the same. I'm a group, you are a group, and we have a problem with a different group. It's not I'm Lebanese, you're Lebanese, and we don't know what to do with this other group that wants to be Lebanese but is not fitting in. We don't fit in as two groups. The only reason I'd say Druze and Marinates are not fighting is because they have a common enemy at the moment. They're busy with Hezbollah. But if Hezbollah was not part of the picture, they'll find something to fight about. Why? Because they're still different groups. They still say us and them. We still have this culture of us and them.
It's interesting when you're talking about the not just longevity. I mean, it's like I know exactly what you're referring to, and that's some of these battles are before we were born, and that's early civil war cleansing, almost ethnic cleansing in the Shuf, and so that. But I know it in and out because I've heard it so many times, and I know also that there's been no healing involved. So it lives on psychologically, and politically too. Uh, the way you're talking about this is it echoes back to Nadim Shahadi, who I've had on my podcast several times. He sat here once. He once referred to a massacre in the Shuf in the 1850s or 1860s. There was one particular massacre, and the Mutasarrifi, I think both sides wanted justice. Both sides wanted vengeance. And the elders met and decided to not seek justice for either side, and then established instead consensus. Both sides will not have what they want. And that kind of shortcut, if you will, problem solving, I think is always meant to prevent further violence. That's 160 years ago, more. I kind of feel like that's still the recipe. It's that no one gets what they deserve.
Yeah.
Is that, and I don't mean it in the right or wrong. It's more like that's the
No,
inertia.
I even think I can't remember the quote, but I think it even turned into a quote that if everyone is feeling the the injustice, it's just.
So there's a quote referring to it.
Yes.
Ah, okay.
And but that's sad
Of course, yeah,
because
yeah.
me feeling that I didn't get my justice. The fact that you didn't get your justice either does
Yeah.
not make my justice my emotions towards my justice
Right,
any
exactly.
easier.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
grievance is still there. And someone says, okay, but yeah, how would justice look like? I don't know. I'm not in that domain. We bring in experts on that in that domain, and they would shape how justice would look like. But we need healing to happen. We need this dialogue to happen, because if it doesn't, and I said this to you once, a few years ago actually, that we're going to keep going from one problem to the other with occasional rests every few years where we think we've fixed the problem until the next problem hits us. We need to fix our identification. And I don't think the 17 October as a movement did that. Yes, it increased national identification. It did that. But also when we speak about what does it mean for you to be Lebanese, we see that people don't share the same vision. They don't share the same story. And I've heard it all. Someone might come and say, yeah, but there's many countries that have different groups. Yes, they do. But then they fixed their problems. They found solutions to the fact that they're not the same groups. So حتى, even when let's say, someone might say, let's jump to federalism. Even jumping there needs a dialogue. Needs us to have a conversation on who we are. The solution, the outcome of this conversation might be, you know what? How about we call this the great federal state of Lebanon, where you tell your people your narrative and acknowledge that I exist, and I would tell my people my narrative and acknowledge that you exist, and then we move on. Well, that can be, but it has to be an outcome. It cannot be a solution that we run to avoid having a conversation. Because having this hard conversation means admitting wrongdoings. نحن, we want to admit wrongdoings only when we're taking credit.
Also seems like the hard conversation which you want and all of us deserve also requires a sensible state already. So the path to all types of reform, or even a shift in governance models, it still requires a central authority that can deliver that. And that's, I guess, where I come back to in terms of, let me try to bring back the two subjects together for what we're going through right now. In the last week, it's almost every player, I think, involved in this conflict now in Gaza, they've all denied Iran's role. It's almost like a unified response. Which makes me wonder, how involved is Iran when they're not when they're all agreeing that Iran is not.
Yeah.
It usually indicates something else. But in this case, everyone's careful with their words, indirect, and no direct involvement, which means indirect is still on the table. So you have that. And just between people talking on the streets. It's not like you don't need to be that well versed in the subject. We all know Iran has a sturdy relationship with Hamas and a sturdier one with Hezbollah. So that's there. To the point that they supply each other weapons here too when they need to, and they strategize here. So Iran, whether they're directly or indirectly involved, they've claimed or reclaimed the Palestinian cause. And now, whether or not, I think to a degree, whether or not we don't like Hezbollah in Lebanon, the group that supports the Palestinian struggle, I think is forced to have a more open mind towards Iran, even when they're cursing Iran, which I think brings me back to what's happening in terms of Lebanese collapse. What you want and what I want, and I think what well-intentioned people want, is to solve the problem. Have a governable state that adheres to everyone's needs, and a national reconciliation and a national dialogue that delivers enough justice for everyone. And you have communities here that see other countries' roles in the region as still maybe not as important, but important enough to break that. So the path to what you want and everything else that's happening, does it happen simply in, do we have to do it abroad? Is this almost like a meeting in exile?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to take it so far down the road.
No doubt that geopolitics play a huge role in how people respond to issues. And no doubt that we live in a very complex region with many regional players, starting with Israel, Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, and then you have Europe, which is not very far, and they also are more or less regional players in that sense, that they're heavily involved in what's going on. The exact how and why, I'm afraid, cannot be decided. It's just a moment that this would happen. But I think having enough awareness about what is required would allow people to identify the gap or the opportunity when it shows itself.
I see.
So would it happen here? Would it happen in Beirut? Would it happen somewhere else? It's not a detail. It would be important. But right now, what is important is to acknowledge that we need that.
I see.
Because even, I think this is part of my disagreement with groups that say our problem today is Hezbollah. I'm not saying it's not. Hezbollah is a problem. They hold weapons and they're holding guns to our heads. However, if you take what I'm saying into consideration and you accept the fact that Hezbollah belonged to a group that historically felt mistreated. Forget south of Lebanon. Shia has been mistreated in Islam, right? Because they are the outlaws of the religion. They are the other ones. They're not the real Islam in a way. And there's this shared feeling amongst them that, again, they are a second-class Muslims. And then there's all the crimes that happened against Shia leaders over the years. So, again, there's this shared trauma. And there's this emotions of fear. And then we come to Lebanon, where there's a small group of Shia and Jabal Amil that have been, in a way, mistreated. And then they were brought in with Lebanon at some point in 1920. Now you're Lebanese. Okay. And then Jewish communities start expanding into south of Lebanon. And those people who are Lebanese now call in the Lebanese government, and the Lebanese government is not responsive because, well, guess what? This new Jabal Amil, this new map that you decided is Lebanon, falls outside my understanding of what is Lebanon as a central government. And therefore, the central government has failed these communities. The same way the central government failed Maronites when the Palestinians came in. Isn't that why the Marinates held arms? Because they called on the central government and the central government was not responsive?
I don't remember the exact quote, but it's something like "you're on your own."
Exactly.
Yeah,
So the Shia felt on their own.
that's from the president of the republic.
Yes.
Yeah.
With, of course, with few differences. I mean, the trajectory took different paths because there are differences. But in essence, you are felt left alone. You try to protect yourself. You, another group, felt left alone. You try to protect yourself. So it's important for us to humanize the experience, make it human.
So it's really offering the template for what's needed, and then that window, if it opens, jump on it.
Yeah.
And the location may be more determined by circumstance, not by necessity.
Yes, I just want to make this one point
Sure.
about Hezbollah because I think it's important.
Of course.
So, would Hezbollah's relationship with Iran allow this to happen? My views is, if you as the other, if you as the one who is less threatened, which is in our case today, people like you and me, who are capable of having this conversation with everyone, capable of being objective or as objective as possible, capable of understanding the different grievances of different groups. If we provide the foundation, we can weaken the ties that this group has with this external force. They only have it because this external force in the 80s came in and told them, you are as important as us. The Lebanese do not treat you well. You are our brothers.
May I ask you, and I know it's putting you on the spot, but I share this sentiment fully. I've even had debates over this where I go far with this. I don't blame anyone for voting for Hezbollah. I don't think of them as less than me. In fact, I think if you're voting for that group today, you probably have a lot of probably well-deserved grievances that are matching many things that have less to do with their individual lives, more to do with societal anxiety and community fear, to the point that you're maybe delivering a message that I may not need to vote for Hezbollah later, but now I am. And it could be that anyone in that circumstance votes in that direction. And fear is part of it too. So I don't blame anyone who lives in a climate of fear for making decisions born from that. I can talk to that person. I could even have that fluent conversation with them. I don't think of them as less than me. But that's almost like a one-on-one exchange. How would that happen structurally for this kind of template? And because like you said, it should happen everywhere.
As a political psychologist, I study individuals. However, I study the impact of those individuals on society. So how this social dynamic happens versus, for instance, a political sociologist who would be studying society or groups at large.
So the individual's power.
I would like to believe that individuals' power dynamics within their groups. So if what it takes is to have individual conversations with few thousand people, and by individual I mean these discussion groups.
Sure.
These 10 people, the conversation between 20 Lebanese every now and then, as a way where we hear each other, we understand each other, where I mean it's very sad when I go on Twitter or X now or any of those platforms and you see how supporters of Hezbollah and then supporters of Owait and Kataib and all the other groups and how they talk to one another. It's like everyone is claiming ownership of the moment, but this emotionally charged moment is driven by the grievance, is driven by pain, is driven by the fact that I used to feel less. Or in the case of Marinates, I used to feel more, and then now I feel less. So this power dynamic, this power struggle, requires a dialogue. And while I acknowledge that there are connections with external players, there are connections with external factors that geopolitics might change things in a moment. We might get a president because the deal happened between the US and Iran, and you'll figure out that we have a president, and next thing you know that we'll have a stable currency and we have a new governor for the central bank. But the question remains, would that fix the problem? My answer is no. that would hide the problem the same way the problem hid after the civil war when Rafiq Hariri had an opportunity to do a reconciliation and he didn't. And he chose not to because he thought, and I'm not blaming him, I'm just saying he thought this is the way forward. We bury the pain and we move on. And again, this was also a mistake that, for instance, Baha al-Hariri tried to make when he decided to support Sawa in the last elections, where he thought the solution is going back to Taif. Not really. The solution is not going back to Taif. The solution is going back to pre-civil war, understanding why it happened. Because saying we have an agreement, I want to apply it, does not work. People do not want to apply the agreement because many feel that they're outside the agreement, because the agreement comes as an outcome of a conversation and not as a replacement of a conversation.
The individual role and that kind of bottom-up led movement of national awakening to a degree. Let's say you have that eventual outcome, and let's hope that at least is taken seriously enough for people to take advantage of it when it happens. I'd like to dedicate the rest of the episode to what you've learned from the last 4 years following October 17, and whether or not this issue is let's say, the fundamental reason to you and your research of why that kind of mass uprising didn't work. And how you place national identity in context of what felt like a cross-sectarian uprising that didn't last.
It was a cross-sectarian uprising. It was a reactionary movement where, it was a snowball effect. Few people went, and then few other people went, and then everyone felt like, yes. The only problem with that, and this has been my opinion, is that movements or revolutions in the street would only work if they are preceded by a political philosophy that at least lays down the foundation of what to expect. And we don't have that. We didn't have that prior to 17 October. We still don't have that. Think about we've seen in the past few hundred years, I'd say three main revolutions: the American, the French, the Russian. These were the three revolutions that changed systems. Everything else was just a coup that changed whoever is in power, but did not change the system in a sense. And this is important to note. So doing a coup and then changing a political leader or an army general with another army general is not a revolution.
Yeah.
This is a coup that's changing who is in charge, but the system is still the same.
I think that's the entire Arab Spring.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is why, to me, it all failed. It's all a reactionary movement. However, in Lebanon, it's different because you don't have one ruler. You have multiple. Multiple rulers that represent different interests and different backgrounds, different narratives. So, in those three big revolutions, the American, the French, and the Russian, there was a political theory that established or that laid the foundation for the establishment that came after. You get my point?
Yeah.
So, this didn't happen. And even with that, the Americans had a civil war after the revolution.
Right, I was actually going to...
The French had an emperor after the revolution.
Yeah.
Okay, with Napoleon, right? So it took time. So nahik ala انه you don't have any of that. You don't have political theorists. You don't have political thinkers. Yes, you have lots of analysts who go on everywhere, but they all are part of a narrative. But people who are willing to sit at home because no one wants to listen, أو لأنه they rather speak with everyone, they are very few and they're hard to find. And we need those people to lay the foundation and to tell us how do they see the future. So we go back to, for instance, you asking me because people go, how do we do this reconciliation? I don't have the answer to that, but I'm happy with at least planting the seed that this is the way forward. Will it take us another 100 years, another 50 years, another civil war? I don't know. But unless we learn, or unless the situation or the environment or the factors allow us to sit together and reconcile and heal and speak about our narratives and our shared interests and our values, we will always be doomed to repeat the same cycle of violence, the same cycle of conflict, and at best, even with a deal in the region, we will have another Rafiq Hariri until it blows up in our face again.
The signals or the signaling for the birth pangs of what you're describing, did any of that occur at least in Lebanon's most recent uprisings? So let's talking about October 17 in particular, but even going back to March 14, and I like that you describe them as reactionary, linking up to other reactionary moments or coups for that matter. But in Lebanon's case, did you sense that any of that was pointing in the right direction, at least what you're talking about?
I think there were attempts. There were attempts, and I think
What are those attempts? If
trying to say that we're all brothers, we're all the same, we're all Lebanese. This was all good because it was sort of trying to establish this superordinate identity where it's saying, we can all be whoever we are on the sectarian level, but there's this superordinate identity. There's a higher level of identification that we can hold on to. Now, the only problem is that no one held on to that and systematically structured it. Because we needed that. We need this systematic structuring of what does it mean to be Lebanese. Instead, we spoke about governance. We spoke about government. We spoke about elections. We spoke about names. And the Sulta, I'm not gonna give them credit of saying that they made this fail. They didn't. I think they didn't know what was going to happen. But the fact that I'm going to say that on the other side, those who were trying to change things, also did not take this moment into a systematic approach, have gave them what they want, because people, at the end of the day, any reactionary moment gets to the peak, and then if there's nothing that would carry this and run with it, starts falling, and this is exactly what happened. Now, some MPs, some political groups would like to think that no, the revolution moved from the streets to politics by establishing political groups. But if we were honest and we looked at the political groups, all of the political groups that managed to get candidates into the parliament are groups that were established before 17 October. Yes, there were opposition.
Right, with the exception of the 13 that...
Even the 13.
And the
majority of them, have had political activity for at least the past decade. Some of them ran in 2018.
I think it's funny when Mark Dow, for example, but
Mark Dow, Brahim Naimni, Halima wanted to run, didn't in 2018. There's Michel Douay, didn't run, but he was thinking about running.
Right.
So there are many names that really were in the political sphere before the revolution, which means the revolution itself did not bring to fruition any development. It gave the opportunity for a few names to move on or to move forward. And I wish that we've taken this opportunity to reconstruct or try to reconstruct at least a booklet of what do we think we as the revolution, since we're representatives of the revolution, what does it mean to be a Lebanese?
So let's say the opportunity was missed. But going back now, I'm thinking of what you said earlier, which is almost like a brotherly moment where we all see each other as the same in different ways too. The thing that comes closest to my memory of that happening is the chants on the street, Kullun Yani Kullun, which defines October 17. Is that the kind of opportunity that you're talking about, where you see people chanting the same message, this almost like poetic rhythmic chant, and that's not enough? You need to now channel that into something larger. Is that the kind of missed opportunity?
Yes.
Okay, so that's one angle. The other one, the 2022 elections, where you have at least 13 new names, but you're right. A big chunk of them have been trying to get in politics for some time. But nonetheless, they didn't succeed in 2018, and they succeed now. Do they also have a missed opportunity in parliament?
Have you been talking to people in the past few months?
Of the 13 or the...
No, of people around the 13 or people who supported the 13.
Yeah, all the time.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Do you feel like people in general are happy with the overall outcome of the work those 13 have been putting?
I don't think the 13 are happy, or the supporters. Yeah.
So this takes us back to the opportunity that we missed. It was not enough to convince the people that we want change. At some point, we had to deliver change. And I understand, I mean, I get it when they say, we've been working on this law or that law. But the problem in Lebanon is beyond that. It's beyond putting a law. It's about restructuring the state. And restructuring the state doesn't necessarily need to be practical. It can be theoretical. But give me a structure that I can follow. Give me a structure that I can promote. Give me a structure, or bring in someone who can. I'm not saying they're all experts in the political field, but I'm saying they can. They have access to individuals who can help in this structuring. But also others have access. I mean, it doesn't have to be those 13. Any of the groups who feel like there's an opportunity, or Masalan, some would say now is not the right time. We have more important things. Yet, like what? Like electing the president. Habibi, you haven't had a meeting to elect the president in months. We haven't moved this important event or this important thing that should have happened forward in any way or form. So when someone says there's more important things that are happening, where? We are in a political coma for the past many months. Why? Because no one has anything to offer. So it's just day-to-day life. It's a day-to-day politics with a government that this current parliament did not actually authorize. The government is still working on 2018's parliament.
The laws, you mean, that have not been...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? So what I'm saying is, fine, we missed the opportunity in the Thawra. We could not bring in a plan. Very good. We had change. People had a change of heart because they had hope, right? And then you went in and you realized you're not ready. The game is bigger than you. So instead of regrouping and rethinking and, maybe bringing in some few more experts to give their opinion, what they think, you went into the game. And now you're playing the game from a different angle. And the same can be said about anyone. Because, you hear lots of voices that say, we can't do anything in Lebanon because Hezbollah is, holding the country a hostage. I refuse this narrative. This is not okay. Because there are many things that can be done that Hezbollah does not control. This is like saying, I want to blame Israel for the fact that Hamas in Gaza does not accept LGBT, and they had 2 gay men killed because they're gay. So you get my point? There's some form of development, of moving forward that should happen by anyone. At this time, I'm happy with anyone making a decision to bring anything forward.
Let's lean on that. You've been involved, on your terms at least, in trying to deliver that message to local actors. And I like you emphasize individuals. It sets the tone right for Lebanon, that even though this needs to be a societal issue, but that there is enough leverage among certain individuals for many reasons to actually make this their cause. In your journey through Lebanese politics, without being directly in politics, but having hosted your own mini-series at least before the elections, having talked to a number of MPs that were running in 2022 and won, you've had an insight, I think, into how people think of this issue. Some old, some new. Has anyone heard you and went with what you're saying and made this their issue? Or do you feel isolated in you, if you will, in this journey?
Um,
And I want to emphasize it's called the happy hour. Happy hour, and before the elections, it was not happy hour, it was another name.
the happy hour.
Happy hour season 1, season 2,
Yeah.
right.
I don't want to say isolated. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't live in Lebanon, and that is a huge contributor to the fact that people can't find you easily. Yes, there are phones, and I'm reachable, but this is one of the excuses that people don't see you, and when people don't see you, you tend to come to their minds less frequently, and when you do that, they don't reach out to you. So I don't want to say I felt isolated because that would be a bit too hard of a judgment on what was going on.
But you're here enough times during the year. So I think to claim that you at least live here
I'm present.
You're
I'm present.
You're
I'm present.
Yeah.
I'm present, and I've had this conversation with many, like you said, with many individuals who are now MPs, and I want to say that maybe from their perception, this was not a priority. Maybe they thought they had a different angle. Maybe they thought they had different insights from other players, and they want to play it out. But I stand by what I said before the elections, because before the elections, I was clear that this election is not going to change anything because we're not ready yet. But any change is a good change because at least we're moving. At least something is happening. Because nothing happening is a disaster. Something happening, no matter how small. Again, we go back to opportunities, right? An opportunity might present itself. Someone might knock the door. Someone might seize the opportunity, and we might have a breakthrough. Unfortunately, between the elections and now, nothing happened in that sense. And I feel like the players, at least the ones that I have a relationship with, have went back to their positions pre-elections or pre-Thawra even, to either blaming Hezbollah or blaming the system or blaming the whatever, and offering no concrete solutions. Maybe one of the people that I spoke to who heard me out tried to test some of what I said, and I think it didn't work out. He felt it didn't work out. I think he didn't try enough. But there have been attempts. I understand. I mean, even if you go back to the COVID days where we had Clubhouse and people were, talking on Clubhouse, and I try to talk to people about this, and it's just that I understand people find it hard because this requires opening up. It requires a conversation. We don't want a conversation. We want to push a button and things to change. And I'm sorry, it doesn't happen this way.
Ramzi, it feels like there should be a cabinet position dedicated to this issue. It shouldn't be the journey of individuals trying to send the message. This should come from the government and say this is our priority. It almost feels like there should be enough of the elders, if you will, that come together and see this as common cause and dedicate a budget to it, because it's a national undertaking. And I think that's a big missed opportunity in the post-Civil War era to not force this issue. I share the sentiment.
We had a Wizarat al-Muhajirin. I just want to say that.
Yeah,
but it was focused on the unfortunately on the monetary aspect of paying people for the houses that they lost.
It's the Ottoman way of healing wounds. Yeah.
But I agree with you, and I do believe that if a decision was made on a political decision on a higher level, test it out. What do you have to lose?
Yeah.
We are already in the lowest of the lowest. We can't go any lower.
That's absolutely true. Let's wrap up the episode with a final thought, and you'll have the final words. That's defining in a way our generation's journey, because we're the post-war kids. So we saw all these people, the way you're shaping it as focusing on issues and leaving this one out, and even up until 2022 that this is not the right time, or which you mentioned earlier, something you don't agree with, which is we can't get to this while Hezbollah is behaving the way it behaves. Let's look at October 17 until today when this comes out, 2023, October 17. let's assume that your feelings are shared, and let's assume your message was heard by enough people, and let's assume even if they don't want to do this right now, they'd like to do this long term. Is there any credence to suggest that the reasons why many good ideas failed post October 17 have less to do with societal inhibitions and more to do with things that just would tear any country apart? That includes a financial crash. I mean, and we're not unique to that, but it's, what did the World Bank say? It's the worst one in modern history. If not, it's in the top 3 maybe. So that can take a toll. The blast, the port blast. I think that kind of event, the largest non-nuclear blast in modern history, being in a capital city, can also, I think, throw away all good ideas, and it may even, in hindsight, be looked at why October 17 failed, or it died on that day. And also that there's this, it's not that I agree with you, you can't simply just ignore everything while Gaza and Hamas and Israel are fighting, but that there is a huge war always at our doorstep, and there's always anxiety of Lebanon being on the brink. Does that let me ask it the right way so to give you the final words. Do you think that what you want would happen had there been less cataclysmic crashes all the time?
No doubt that if we were in a better position, it would have been easier to talk about this. But my concern is that in a better position, people wouldn't want to talk because they'd say, it's okay now. And this is what I fear when the deal comes, because the deal is coming. And you mentioned Iran. And
Doha, you mean? Yeah.
no, a deal is coming, and I trust that Iran is going to get what they want, and we are going to move forward with peace. This is my personal opinion.
Oh, deal meaning Babda, or deal meaning
A deal, a regional deal.
a regional deal? Oh, okay.
Which is why, as you said, people our governments have not pointed fingers at Iran because I'd say they're all in on it because it's heading somewhere, it's going somewhere. My fear, and I said this in 2019, my fear is that if a deal comes and the economic situation gets better, we will not get a chance to fix this problem. And the only time we will look at this again is 20 years from now, when we, have our next prime minister killed, or our next president shot, or our next conflict over who do we support in what. When I look at conflict and war, even with the situation that hit Lebanon, it's been 4 years now since the crisis. It's been 3 years since the explosion. People, I don't want to say moved on in the sense that life is normal. I want to say that people got used to it. Mm-hmm. People are getting married. They're looking for new jobs. They're having babies. Mm-hmm. They're going out. We've had a very busy summer with everyone, coming in and enjoying the... So what I'm saying is, while I understand that the situation could have been better and that some people are too busy with the situation, with their daily lives, that they don't care about what you have to say, I would say enough people are privileged enough to have this conversation. Those who are employed, who go to work, وبيطلعوا بيسهروا بالweekend, or go to clubs, or go have a case بعد الشغل, those people have the privilege to have the conversation I'm talking about. And I think now is the right time to have this conversation, because now everyone is willing to listen, because everyone got to the point where they feel خلاص, we hit rock bottom. There's no solution in sight. We don't know what to do. If not now, when everyone is listening, when?
In a way, it's a catch-22. At the rock bottom, the unwillingness you displayed, and when we're in a better position, the reluctance to do so. But I'm glad we're having this conversation here, and I'm glad this episode comes out on October 17. I want to thank MTV for giving us this kind of space to do this in a quiet setting for 1 hour and 20 minutes. And I want to thank you, Ramzy. Every time you're in town, we're doing an episode. So you dedicate 1 hour of your time, of your vacation, to speaking with me. I think we're leaving the kind of template you're describing, and it's long overdue. And at least now it's become accessible enough for people to really listen to what you're saying. So I also want to say, your soon-to-be PhD, Dr. Ramzy Abu Ismail, Mabruk.
Thank you.
Well deserved.
Thank you.
Again, it's the political psychologist on Instagram. Follow Ramzy. And thank you.
Thank you, Roni.